Chris, you ready? Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming out today. I appreciate it. You all know that we are doing a compensation study at this time. We're also doing what's called a classification study. So we're looking at all of the job descriptions to see if we can't streamline what we have in place. Okay? Today we have Steve Foster with us from MAG, which is the Management Advisory Group International. He's going to go through some slides with you in reference to the survey that your employees will be doing, and you'll have to go in behind them and look at them and approve them and even maybe make some comments. So he's going to go through all of that. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to him. At the end of this, you'll have an opportunity to ask questions, and of he or I, either one, whichever you need to ask, so then we can answer those. Okay? All right. Mr. Foster.
Thank you, John. Hey, good morning, everybody. I'm very happy to be down here in Sumter. Just a little bit about our company to get us started. We are a public sector consulting firm out of Fairfax, Virginia. We actually have a lot of offices in this part of the Southeast. I'm actually from Asheville myself, so I'm down here a couple of days, enjoying my time here. And we like having these administrative type meetings just to let, from a supervisor perspective, just to let you know what the study is all about. We really do rely on your leadership to make sure that some of the employees that maybe don't have access to computers and things like that, that you're able to help them do these questionnaires that I'm going to tell you about. What we want to do in this study is we want to, first we want to evaluate your current structure. That's going to let us know what needs to be addressed and what needs to be updated. But we also want to make sure that we're taking a look at market competitiveness, and the way we do that is through a market survey, which I'll get into here shortly. The other thing we do is internal equity, and what I mean by that is we're going to take a look at all of the jobs within the study here in the district, just to make sure that everybody is classified correctly. And the way that works is we're going to compare duties and responsibilities for each job, and then any jobs that are similar, we're going to group them together for compensation purposes. We're also going to work closely with human resources, and one of the things we want to do is make sure that we leave them with some policies that we've found helpful around the country when we've done these studies, so that they can be consistent along with some of the other organizations we've helped along the way. This is the scope of the project. We're looking at approximately 2,700 positions here in the district, and that breaks down into 40 unique job titles. For the questionnaire I'm going to tell you about, it doesn't include teachers, so that's going to knock down the number of positions down to about 1,100. So what we're wanting to do first is we want to get the most current information possible directly from the employees and their supervisors. I can't think of a better source of the information that we need than people that are doing the job and the people that supervise that job. So by having them work on this questionnaire as a team, it's going to help us out with that effort. I already mentioned the internal equity, how that works. The external equity, that's where the market survey comes into play. So once we get everything lined up internally, we're going to compare Sumter schools to other districts around the state, and we're going to be able to find out just how competitive you all are within the market. We're going to come up with a implementation plan, and like I was telling the people yesterday, my job would be super easy if all I had to do is walk in and say everybody gets a raise, drop the mic, and leave. But when we're doing these implementation plans, we have to make sure that they're affordable. So that's where the balancing act comes in. That's where we really have to earn our money on these studies to make sure we come up with something that's affordable for the district. And last but not least, we have a unique software with our company called Classification Manager. And it gives us an advantage because not only do we come in and do the study, but after we're gone, Human Resources is still able to use this software to keep the information updated for a few years to come. So it's not really a static study. They're able to use that information and apply it into the future. And speaking of Classification Manager, that's what the front page of it looks like. And Human Resources will become very familiar with this as we go further into the study. We'll give them training on this, and they'll be able to use that to their advantage. We always like to tell the employees what we're not here to do also, because depending on how long it's been between studies, I've been places where coming in, maybe there's a negative vibe from the previous study. So we just like to let people know what we're here to do and what we're not here to do. So what we're not here to do, we're not here to identify staffing levels. We've done that in other studies, but that's not part of this one. We're also not here to reorganize departments or functions. This next one's very important, and I always emphasize this. We're not here to evaluate personal performance or capabilities. We're here to study the jobs themselves. We're looking to make sure that we understand the core duties and core responsibilities associated with each job. Anything to do with individual performance or capabilities, we're going to leave that in the hands of the supervisor. This next one, we just have to be upfront and let people know that as a result of this survey, we cannot guarantee a salary increase. But I always tell people that when we're doing our study, we're going to gather as much new information as possible. We're going to come up with a detailed report, and any shortfalls that we find will be highlighted in that report. We want to make sure that the people that are making the decisions are going to have an opportunity to make a well-informed decision. And last, we never recommend a salary decrease. And I can guarantee this one, because as we're doing our study, the way it works, if we're working on a particular job and it looks like that job is either at or above what we were going to recommend, we just stop right there and we leave that job exactly where it's at. This is where I'd like to talk a little bit about the role of the employee and the supervisor and how they work together as a team to complete the questionnaire. The employee's going to go in first. It's an online questionnaire, so they're going to log in. They're going to answer all the questions to the best of their ability. And when they're done, they have to be completely done. They're going to pass on their questionnaire to their supervisor. Now, the supervisor is going to go in and they're going to be able to see all of the selections that the employee made, and they'll have the opportunity to either agree or disagree with that selection. The supervisor cannot change or delete anything that the employee has already stated. And we do that on purpose, because when we're doing our review of these questionnaires, we want to make sure that we're getting an unblemished perspective for both the employee and the supervisor. So the questionnaire I've been referring to all this time is officially called the Job Profile Questionnaire, JPQ for short, and it is our main tool for gathering new information. We're going to use this information to compare to the old job descriptions, and we'll be able to make updates based on what we get back from these questionnaires. We are asking for 100% participation, but realistically, we don't expect to get back a completed questionnaire from every individual, but what we really want to make sure we have as a minimum is at least one completed questionnaire for every job title. So there's actually two ways to do the questionnaire. You can either fill one out individually, which is just like it sounds. You log in using your own information, you fill out your own questionnaire, and then you send it on to your supervisor. The other option is a group questionnaire, and the way that works, there are a few restrictions. You have to have the same job title, the same supervisor, and you must be performing similar duties to participate in a group questionnaire. And the way that would work is one person would log in, and then all of the employees in the group would answer the questions as a group. And I'll go into a little bit more on that here towards the end. So to get to our questionnaire, you have to go to our website. It's www.magintl.org. And I do want to mention that we provided some information to Human Resources, and they're going to be passing this out at the end of the week. It's going to have a lot of the information that I'm talking about here, just so you don't feel like you have to memorize everything I'm saying. This is more of an introduction to what we're doing, and the documentation that they'll provide is going to back all of this up for you. Also want to mention that due to the sensitivity of our software, we do recommend only using 3 of the browsers listed here, which is Firefox, Google Chrome, and Microsoft Edge. You have to complete the questionnaire on either a desktop or a laptop. If you try using your phone or a tablet, it's not going to work. We'll probably let you in, but I can guarantee you somewhere along the way it's going to freeze up on you. So make sure that you're using one of these 3 browsers so you don't have any issues. So to get started, you're going to scroll down to the bottom of our page, and in the left-hand corner is a section that says Job Profile Questionnaire. And below that is a blue login button. When you click on that button, that's how you get started. And the first thing you're going to see, we have a 2-step process for logging in. This first login is for clients, so everybody's password is going to be the same. It's going to be MAG, M-A-G, 2022. It's going to be all caps, no spaces. So type that in, click on the green Go button, And the next page up is the organization page. We have a drop-down menu for this, and also for the password box. So it's the same number in both boxes. Once you get that entered, click on Login. And the next page that comes up, this one's blank, but the one on your questionnaire is actually going to have a lot of this information already filled in for you. You're going to see your name, your department, your job title, your hire date, and your promotion date. All we're asking for here, we want the employees to verify that this information is correct. If you spot any errors at all, please contact Human Resources. They're going to keep a running tally of any corrections that need to be made, and we'll make those all at once. It's not something that you can correct yourself because it's part of our database, but we're especially interested in hire dates and promotion dates because later on in the study, we'll be using those dates for calculations, so we need to make sure that they're correct. There is going to be one box at the top that will be blank, and that's the working job title box. And we use that for people that we realize that a lot of jobs over time have evolved, maybe even to the point that the job title itself may be obsolete. So if that's the case, if you have a better idea for what the job title should be, you can put that under working job title. Now down at the bottom, this is where you're going to select the supervisor, and this is the person that's going to review your questionnaire. And the way this works, there's a drop-down menu, and all the supervisors are listed alphabetically by last name. As far as who to select, we recommend selecting your immediate supervisor as long as that's the person that's also writing your annual reviews or evaluations. So if your immediate supervisor doesn't do that, make sure that you're selecting the person that does. That's who you want to review your questionnaire. Also want to point out that if for some reason that there's not a supervisor that you need listed on that drop-down menu, we can fix that. You just have to let Human Resources know so we can get that person added right away. But even if there's some errant data up above or a missing supervisor down below, you can still work on your questionnaire. You can answer all the questions. You just won't be able to fully complete your questionnaire until you select a supervisor. So after verifying the information and selecting a supervisor, this is the next page. This is actually the top of the questionnaire. And there's a middle row of buttons there, and that middle button says Expand All Sections. The way our questionnaire is set up, it's basically one long page, so you're going to be scrolling through it, answering the various questions. So anytime you log in, we ask that you click on the Expand All Sections button, and what that's going to do, it's going to fully open up the questionnaire. So as you're scrolling through, you'll see everything there is to see for all the questions and all of the options. Oh, and by the way, if you forget to do that, it's not a big deal. You'll just start scrolling through. You'll notice that the questionnaire is a little bit shorter than it should be. Just go back up to the top, click on that button, and you'll be fine. Now, at the top, we have a couple of buttons that are very important. We have a blue complete button and a red save button. And we call these floating buttons because no matter where you're at on the questionnaire, top, middle, or bottom, they're going to always be visible. And we want that to be the case because we want them there as a constant reminder for you. The complete button, hopefully, you're only going to have to use that one time, and that's when you're completely finished with your questionnaire. You don't want to change any of your answers, and you're ready for your supervisor to do their review. If that's the case, you click on the blue button. It's going to release the questionnaire from you and send it on to your supervisor for their review. If you hit that complete button and nothing happens, that means there was something down below in the questionnaire that was required that wasn't answered. So the good thing is, at this point, since you've already clicked on the complete button, all you have to do is scroll through the questionnaire one last time, and anything that was required will now be highlighted in red. So just fix any of those red areas, come back to the complete button, hit it again, and you'll be good to go. There is one change you can still make to the questionnaire after you hit the complete button, and the only thing you can still change is if for some reason you needed to change supervisors. We've had situations in the past where a supervisor had to leave suddenly and somebody else had to step in and complete the review. So we want the employee to have the ability to go back into their questionnaire even after they're done and change their supervisor if need be. All right, the red button, that is the save button. And the reason we have that on there is we highly recommend, if possible, that you work on your questionnaire in more than one session. It's set up to where you can go in there, work on it a little bit at a time. Some of these questions are very in-depth. They take a while to answer. Other ones you can breeze through pretty quickly. So we just want to make sure that you have the opportunity to go in there and work on it at your leisure. But anytime that you work on your questionnaire, make sure that you're clicking on that red save button before you exit. And what that's going to do, it's going to save everything that you've done up until that point. The good thing about the save button is if you answer a question one day and you come back in on your next session and you want to change that answer, that's not a problem. You have complete editing control of your questionnaire until you hit the blue complete button. And the last thing I want to mention about the save button that's very important is if you're working on your questionnaire and you decide you need just a little bit of a break, walk away for a minute or two, anytime you walk away from your computer, make sure you hit that red save button. Sometimes a 1 or 2 minute break ends up being longer than you intended, and we do have a setup within our website to where if there's no keyboard activity or mouse activity for 15 or 20 consecutive minutes, it's going to log you out. So as long as you hit that red save button, if you come back to a login screen, you log back in, you pick up right where you left off. On the flip side of that, if you walked away without hitting the save button, you're going to come back to a login screen and you log back in. Anything you just did in that most recent session, you're going to have to do again. So just keep that in mind. And again, that's the reason we have these buttons visible throughout the entire time. We want to remind you to use them to your advantage. So this is where we get started on the questionnaire itself. And I want to start off with the essential task list. This is the one page of the questionnaire that's going to take the most time and effort to complete. We're asking for a lot of information here. We're looking for anywhere from 1 to 10 of your most essential tasks. And what we're looking for in that first column is just a brief description of what the task is. And we want to know how long it takes you to do that particular task. And we're also interested in knowing how often you do it. So as an example, let's just say that task number 1 is something that you spend 4 hours out of your week working on. And just to keep the math nice and simple, let's keep the work week at the standard 40 hours. So if you're spending 4 out of 40 hours on task number 1, that's going to be 10% of your work week. So you would put 10% in the percentage column. The frequency column, or how often you do this job, it's actually a drop-down menu. So we have choices like daily, weekly, monthly, annually. There's several other choices. It's got a lot of flexibility. So for our example, if you're spending 4 hours out of 40, 10% of the time, that's going to be a weekly task. So just make sure that whatever you're choosing for your frequency matches up with your percentage. So, and like I said, there's all kinds of choices in there, even something for an annual task. If it's something that you do annually that's very important, you still list it in here by selecting annual for the frequency. There's also a column at the far right, and that is a rank column. And the reason we put that in there is we do not expect the employees, as they're listing these individual tasks, we don't expect them to list them in their order of importance. If you're thinking of them off the top of your head, you might put your most important task second or third, and that's not a problem. All we ask is that you rank them for us. So if you had a total of 5 tasks on this page, we just ask that you rank them for us 1 through 5, with 1 being the most important. So that was the essential task list, and like I said, that's the one that's going to take the longest to complete because we're asking for a lot of information. The good news is the rest of the questionnaire is a little bit more user-friendly, and it's set up in this format here. We call these job factors, and we have 14 of them in the questionnaire. So out of the 22 sections, 14 of them are going to be just like this. And the way these work, each job factor is its own subject. So in this case, we're looking at data responsibility. We want to know how data responsibility applies to each person's job. So you can only select one statement down below, but these statements are listed in the order of responsibility. So the top statement would be the least amount of responsibility, the bottom statement, the most amount. So the best way to approach all 14 of these job factors is to first look at the subject, think about how that particular subject applies to your job, and then start with the first statement. If that first statement is less than what you do, then keep reading until you find the statement that's the best match. And you can only select one statement. It's going to check off the box for whichever one you select. If you try to select more than one, it's only going to save your most recent selection. And I also like to point out that we realize that you may not find an ideal match in these statements. If that's the case, just select the one that's closest because you have to pick at least one. You have to pick one of the statements, and then come down below to that comments box if you'd like to give us a little bit more information on how this particular area applies to your job. Speaking of that comments box, it's on every page of the questionnaire, and I'd like to encourage people to use that. When we get these questionnaires back to our office, eventually we do put all this information into a database. We crunch a ton of numbers. But before we do that, we're going to review each and every one of these questionnaires that we get back. We have a team of analysts, and it's their job to go over all of these questionnaires. So people that put extra effort into them by giving us additional information, it really does help, and it's not a waste of your time. I also want to point out for the supervisors, like, as far as the review process goes, this is exactly what you're going to see when you're doing your review. You'll see all of these different pages, and you'll see the response that the employee made. So you'll have the opportunity to either agree with that selection, or if you disagree, you can make your own selection. Again, you can't change what the employee said. That's how we get our side-by-side comparison of what the employee thinks and what the supervisor thinks. I did want to mention also that I've done a lot of these reviews in the past, and it's not unusual to see a slight disagreement between the employee and the supervisor. What typically happens is the employee may choose a lower level of responsibility. Maybe they chose statement 1 or statement 2. And then the supervisor comes in during the review, and the supervisor has more experience, more knowledge about the job. So they might choose a 3 or a 4, indicating to us that there's more to this job than what the employee said. So that's not rare. That's basically just the supervisor coming in and filling in some blanks. And there's several reasons for that. I mean, the employee, maybe maybe they're new to the job. Maybe they were in a hurry to get done with this questionnaire, or maybe they were just modest. But either way, it really does help having that supervisor input when it comes to these questionnaires. The only time we would ever get concerned would be if there was a big difference between what the employee chose and what the supervisor chose. So just for example, let's just say that the employee for this thought they had a lot of responsibility, so they chose statement number 7, which is way down the page. Supervisor comes in, takes a look at that, and says, nope, that's way too much responsibility. So the supervisor might choose a 2 or a 3. If we see that during the course of our review, that's definitely going to raise some eyebrows, and we would get in touch with Human Resources, and if need be, we would even contact the employee and supervisor themselves to make sure we resolve whatever miscommunication there was. So that's an extreme example, but I like to use that to illustrate what our questionnaire is capable of pointing out. So if something like that was happening, we'd be able to spot it and resolve it. So that was data responsibility. This is a list of all 14 of the job factors, and as you can see, it's a wide variety of subjects. So depending on the job, some of these are going to have a higher impact than others. We had to come up with this type of system when we designed our questionnaire, mainly because we're comparing so many different type jobs across so many different career fields. We need to find a common thread. So coming up with these 14 job factors and being able to measure levels of responsibility allows us to do that, and that's what helps us make our classifications when we're grouping the jobs together properly. This here is section 22. This is the last page of the questionnaire. And I mentioned the group questionnaire earlier, so I just want to go back and talk about that just a little bit. Again, for a group questionnaire to take place, everybody in the group has to have the same job title, the same supervisor, and it must be performing similar duties. The way it's going to work, one person is going to log in as the employee. Then everybody within the group answers the questions. And when the person that logged in, when they get to the very end, we just ask that that person provide a list of the people that participated in the group questionnaire. It helps us out for our studies. We like to track participation rates, but it also helps the supervisor. When the supervisor's doing their review, when they get to this page here, they'll realize that it's more than just one person that worked on this questionnaire. Another good reason for additional comments is I mentioned the essential task list earlier, and the fact that you're limited to a total of 10 essential tasks. Well, for most people, they're more than happy to stop after 5 or 6. There are a few who like to go above and beyond. So if you want to list more than 10 additional tasks, once you get past number 10, just come to the additional comments section and put that information in there. And like I said, we'll be reviewing these personally, so we'll be able to see those extra comments. And last but not least, if you get all the way to the end of your questionnaire and you feel like there's something that we didn't cover thoroughly enough, or possibly didn't cover at all, it's very important to your job, go ahead and list that information here so we can see that as well. For the supervisors, I want to point out a little bit about the supervisor review process and how that works. Everything I've shown you up until this point within the questionnaire is underneath the Home tab. For supervisors, you have to go one tab over to the right and click on My Employees. When you do, you'll see this page right here, and any of your employees that chose you as their supervisor, you'll see their names down listed below if they've completed their questionnaire. If they're still working on it, they're not going to show up here. One thing I do want to mention is we do not have the electronic capability to notify supervisors when an employee completes their questionnaire. So it's going to be up to the supervisors to go back to this page frequently, maybe every day, every other day, just to see if any of your employees have finished their questionnaire. But there is a flaw in that. The best thing to have is a good communication between the employee and the supervisor just to make sure nothing is missed. And what I mean is, if the employee thinks they finished their questionnaire, but they don't tell you, and you're checking this page and they're not showing up, you think they're still working on the questionnaire, and they think they're done, so nothing's going to change. If your employee comes to you and says they're done, and you go to this page, and they're not showing up, then you know there's an issue. And typically it's going to be one of two things. If a employee may have answered every single question in the questionnaire, but if they did not hit that blue complete button, it's not going to show up on this page. It's just hanging out there in limbo. Or if the employee chose a different supervisor, it's not going to show up on your page either. So if you go to this page, your employee says they're done, and you don't see them, go back to that employee one last time, ask them to log back in, and confirm that they hit the blue complete button, and also that they selected you as their supervisor. If you go through that, that's going to solve most of these problems right there within the department. But if not, if you go through all that and you're still having issues, at that point, contact Human Resources. They'll look into it, and if they're having problems with it, they'll get in touch with us, and between us, we'll get it figured out for you. Also want to mention about the blue complete button, something I didn't mention earlier. As a supervisor, once you're finished with your own questionnaire, go ahead and click on the complete button. You can still get to this page right here, and you can still do your reviews. So all you're doing by hitting that complete button is releasing your own questionnaire and sending it on to your supervisor. All right, it wouldn't be a PowerPoint without a flow chart, so this is ours. This just kind of shows you the process of how we go through our study. There at the top, it shows how we kind of balance the internal equity with the external equity. And once we get the process rolling, the results come in rapid fire, starting with a proposed salary schedule, adjustments, organizational costs, and implementation options. So that's it. That's our study in a nutshell. But it looks pretty simple on there, but it's a lot of moving parts. We call these our steps to success, and it's just a little bit more detailed information on the flow chart I just showed you. We're currently on step 2, which is where we're doing the employee communication, which is what these questionnaires are all about. The questionnaires are a very big part of the study. That's why we like having these presentations. We don't like to just send them out electronically and say, please do this. We want to have a face to the process. We want to be able to answer questions and make sure we're getting maximum participation. So after we get the questionnaires back, the next step is going to be the classification process I mentioned earlier, and that's where we're going to take the old job titles and descriptions that we have now. We're going to compare them to the information that we get back through these questionnaires, and we're going to make sure that everything is up to date. During that same time frame, that's when we start conducting our market survey, and that's where we're going to solicit information from other school districts around the state. Okay, I'm sorry, I see an error there already. Instead of Atlanta, it should be Sumter, my mistake. What we're looking for here, though, I just wanted to touch on the market survey a little bit more closer. The way we select people for the market survey, they either fall into one of two categories. They're either going to be a competitor, which means they're close enough by the Sumter schools to where an employee can just hop in their car, drive a few extra miles, and get more compensation. So anybody that falls into that category, we want to make sure we're including them in our market survey so we can see what we're competing against. The other category is a peer, and that is an organization that's either similar in size or structure that we can compare to Sumter schools to see how they operate and how they compensate their employees. So that's the criteria for coming up with our market survey. And this is a list of those peers. We have a total of 10 of them. And we're also going to make sure not only are we going to get data from these school districts, but some jobs here in the district, you don't have to work in a school district to do that job. So we want to make sure that we get some private sector information as well. So we'll be using, it's a site called ONET. It's put out by the Department of Labor. and it allows us to measure the private sector compensation for jobs that are competing in that category. As far as benchmarks, what I mean by that is in the market survey, what we do, we can't send out every job title to these other organizations and expect them to respond. So it's a little bit delicate. We have to make sure that the market survey is small enough to where they're going to help us out and answer it. So what we do is we select benchmarks. And there are various types of jobs throughout the pay scale from top to bottom. And these are some of the categories that we use for that. And the nice thing about selecting jobs from top to bottom is even if you're in a job here that there's no comparison to in other districts, we're still able to fit you in based on that level of benchmarks and figure out where you should be on the new pay scale. This is the last part of the steps to success, and again, this is just a little bit more detail from the flow chart that I showed you. So we're going to come up with a new pay plan based on what we come up with from classification and from the market survey. We'll take all that information, we'll analyze it, we'll come up with our findings and our recommendations, and that is what's going to go into our initial draft report. So once we get that initial draft report put together, the first thing we do with that is we send it to Human Resources to make sure that we're technically sound. Once we get that taken care of, we're going to send out the draft report to the department heads just to make sure that we've addressed all of their concerns. So the draft report process, it's a lot of moving parts, usually several rewrites, but eventually we'll get everything in there that needs to be in there, and then we'll come up with a final report. And the final report is what gets presented to the leadership to come up with an implementation plan. So we're on a pretty fast track with this study. We're already in February, and our goal is to have our findings and make sure that we have that we're prepared to implement the new plan by the next fiscal year, which is July 1st. So July kind of sounds a little ways away right now because we're only in February, but as a school district, I'm sure you know that it's going to go by pretty fast. So we definitely need your help when it comes to getting these questionnaires going. So I want to wrap up by showing you a little bit of a timeline and how everything fits together. As you can see, the questionnaire period is here at the top. We're looking at about a 2-week window starting a week or 2 weeks from this coming Friday for the employees to complete their portion of the questionnaire. Once that's done, we're adding an extra week on top of that for the supervisors to complete their reviews. So by that point, we're getting into mid-March, and that's where we're going to get these questionnaires back at our office, and that's where we go into the classification review process along with the market survey. So, and again, from there, the draft reports that I mentioned a minute ago, followed by a final report that will be presented in time for implementation in July of 2023. So that is it in a nutshell. I just want to encourage you as supervisors, we're not, you can't mandate people fill out these questionnaires, but we could definitely use your help encouraging them to fill them out. And for people that don't have access to ready access to a computer, if you can help point them in the right direction, then that would be extremely helpful as well. So with that, I will be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Anyone have any questions?
Hey, will every employee receive the questionnaire, or is it just specific?
Every employee, if they're not a teacher.
Okay.
Right. In fact, for teachers, just so you know, we are doing a separate teacher comparison for that. It's just, for the questionnaires, we realized that these are the types of jobs that have changed over time. Teachers, I mean, we're pretty aware of what they do, and there's not a lot of change to what they've done. So when we're looking at compensation issues, we're not as concerned about duties, because they're not going to change enough to warrant them having to fill out this questionnaire.
Are part-time staff required to complete the questionnaire as well?
I believe we have them in the database as well, and if it's a part-time position that shares a title with a full-time position, if they want to get together as a team and fill it out, they could do that as well.
The speech-language pathologist in the district, we're on the teacher pay scale. But
Okay.
will we have a separate survey from the teachers, or will they have to answer the one that the teachers? Because our job responsibilities are different.
I'm going to have to look at the list of job titles for the questionnaire, because I didn't look at that ahead of time. Typically, if you're on the teacher pay scale, you're with the teachers, but if it's a certain job title, it's still possible that you could be involved in the JPQ process as well. So the quickest way to find out would be to try to put your employee ID into the questionnaire and see if it accepts it.
Okay.
If it does, then you're eligible to fill out the questionnaire. If it doesn't accept it, it's because you're on the teacher pay scale.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, sorry I don't have a direct answer for that, but that's the best way to check on it at this point.
Anyone else?
Several people could be on the same survey. So
Right.
would you recommend like getting all of your building services people together and listing their names and going through it with them as a group?
If they're willing to do that, we only offer the group questionnaire as an additional option. In fact, I've told people, if you participate in a group questionnaire and you don't feel like your voice is being heard well enough to your satisfaction, you can still fill out an individual one as well. But the group one is just a way to bring people in that maybe wouldn't have worked on it otherwise because they didn't want to do it on their own. But again, you just have to make sure the criteria matches. It has to be same job title and the same supervisor and the same duties. And it helps the supervisor too, because if you've got 15 people doing the same job and they fill out one questionnaire, that's only one review for the supervisor versus a whole bunch of extra ones. So,
And I would also look at cafeteria staff, bus drivers, those folks that you can collect together to get them to come in to make sure that we get their surveys. Yes, Mr. Foster mentioned something about some literature that's going to be coming out from us. First of all, you're going to get some handouts, and it will explain and go through some of these as well, the slides. And then you will also get a card for each one of your employees, and you can pass those cards out. They're supposed to be in the mail today for us, and what the cards will do, it will have their name and their employee number on it. So you won't have to worry about employee numbers. If there is an issue with the employee numbers, the bookkeepers at the school have access to the employee numbers. HR has access, and so does finance. Okay, so there are some resources out there if they don't have it, but it should be on that card. Anybody else? This is rolling out as soon as we can get the cards and we can get them sorted, because I'm sure they're going to come in alphabetically. We're going to have to sort them in our department and send them out to the schools, so it may be Monday or Tuesday before they actually get to you. But this should be available starting tomorrow and Monday to log on, okay? Some of them know their employee numbers already.
Marva, can we work hard to get that done for Monday? Because they have that half day. It'd be a perfect time for all the classified staff to be able to do it.
Will the nurses' cards be sent to the principals or to me? Okay.
Anyone else? All right. Well, if no other questions in reference to the process, we're going to go ahead and close this out. Mr. Foster, thank you again for speaking with us today. If you have some individual questions, if you want to stay and ask, we'll absolutely answer them for you. Okay?
thank you all very much.
All right. Thank you, folks. I appreciate